Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So I finally completed enough of the trial runs to actually go and purchase my weapons that you can obtain through Crown of Keldagon. Now here in the campaign store we can go and we can actually spend those Valindra's gems. You'll basically get one per chest upon completing the trial, and here we can buy our full weapon set. So I'm going to do so here on my rogue. We'll buy the main hand there, and we'll buy the offhand there. And with that, we now have the new mythic weapons in our inventory. Now this is indeed the live server, with all the auction house filled up with junk there, and we can go and actually slot them in and see if they're comparable against, let's say, Mirage, or even using the Masterwork set when you're in a full party. That's currently what I grind the trial with. We're in a DPS party and each one of us uses these Masterwork weapons, which means each of us gains 10% outgoing damage, 10% outgoing healing, not that we benefit from that, but 10% reduced incoming damage, which is awesome. However, these new weapons, they are indeed mythic. The first thing I'd like to check out is, do they actually have weapon modifications? And we can see they do not. So straight off the bat, compared to using like Masterwork or Lionheart or Mirage, we are going to lose this modification here with Duelist Flurry, where we gain 10% extra damage from our at-will, which I also believe affects the bleed effect. Me from the future here, who done a bit of testing with those modifications and whether or not using, let's say, a Lionheart with the modification of Duelist Flurry, does it actually affect that bleed? It actually doesn't affect the bleed. And we can see that with the logs here. This is our setup without using the buff to our Duelist Flurry, and this is the base damage then with using the 10% damage on our Duelist Flurry. And we can see this bleed damage, the base damage that we get there, you can see it here as well, is exactly the same across the board. Meaning if we look at a damage log here where we dealt nearly 1 million encounter DPS, we can see Duelist Flurry is there at about 60,000 encounter DPS, and that's only like 6% of our overall damage. So losing 10% of that is very minimal, and you'll basically not notice it, especially by gaining the base damage increase by having the item level. So you can see it's pretty massive between these new weapons and, let's say, Mirage at only 800. And now back to speaking about these modifications and what you lose, because you can see on the offhand we're losing this, let's say, recharge speed 2.5%. Other people might use the action points, and otherwise these stats. Now let's again go slot them in. Very fortunate we don't actually have to get them upgraded. We can have a look at the visuals on these. I just have to clear this item visuals and save where this, and we can see that this is what the sticks look like. Nothing too fancy. You can see in combat you'll hold them like so, one of them to the front and one of them to the back, and overall, in my opinion, not too spectacular. And I might end up just melting them down into actual cosmetics if they don't seem to prove too worthy. Now, of course, I'm going to have to test these out within the new trial and compare that against DPS like we see here. And could we manage to hit those values again with this new weapon set? We can compare our damage. Now let's jump over to the training room and we'll summon this big boss guy. Now, when you look at the tooltips of these weapons, you can see it'll give you that set bonus there, which is a bit of a wall of text, but it's mainly because DPS are getting a different bonus, while tanks get another bonus and healers get a separate bonus. And this is pretty good, having that division, because tanks want survivability, DPS just want more damage, and healers want that extra outgoing healing. On this set, you can see that DPS are getting recharge speed, which could be pretty good for a rogue, being able to cast these encounter powers, which all have like 12 seconds, 15 seconds, and nearly 14 seconds, and that would be pretty beneficial. And we'll also gain some action point bonus. Tanks, stamina, action points, healers, movement speed, and action points. Now, the bigger bonus on this is the fact that we can gain 7.5% outgoing damage, damage. Tanks will gain the reduced incoming damage, so it's like the Celestial set, but at least for tanks we can actually gain a damage resistance boost, and for healers you can again gain that outgoing healing boost. Now these are only going to occur when you cast encounter power. So we go in combat here, we cast one encounter power. You can see up the top left there we have one stack of Scale Breaker's Ire, and now this stack lasts for 20 seconds, and if we cast another encounter power it gets refreshed, and we can keep doing so, and it just keeps giving us those stacks. Now we can only get to a maximum of, I believe, 6 of these stacks. Well, in fact 5, and as soon as you cast the next encounter power you'll basically consume all of those stacks. Now those 5 stacks are currently giving me 5% more recharge speed, so my recharge speed is about 20% there. And now if you don't use another encounter power before the stacks expire, well, they're gone, and you're going to have to go and cast those encounter powers all over again. So it's going to take us 2 rotations to actually gain the buff to give us this Scale Breaker's Wrath, which gives us that total of 7.5% outgoing damage. Meaning the first rotation of your encounters won't even gain that extra damage boost that the weapons should be giving you. Meaning you'd be better off if you're in a very short fight where you aren't going to be able to cast a lot of encounter powers. You'd be better off having like the Lionheart, which just straight up gives you 7.5% extra damage when your stamina is full. Of course, when you dodge, that decreases, but you will also gain a survivability boost, which can be tit for tat better. But then, of course, you have weapons like the Mirage weapons, which can outperform, when the clones don't die all the time, better than an overall 7.5% damage boost to all of your powers. Because keep in mind, the damage boost of 7.5% is all additive with your other damage boosts. So if you have like 100% damage boosts already, you're nearly like halving the effectiveness of any other damage boost you add on. So one last note about these modifications and what you're going to miss. You do of course miss your 10% on your at-will, depending on what class you are. On a rogue it's not going to be such a big deal, but then on the offhand we're losing that 2500 of said stat. Now if you take the ideal scenario where, let's say, this was combat advantage or power and had that on 2500, we can see with the math here, switching to the new Mythic Weapons is actually slightly better at a 0.4% damage increase, just because the item level, even if you miss 2500 power. You can see the math there again, and that's using the formula all here. You can see that with those cell blocks. And on top of that, you can look at this recharge speed, 2.5%. Now with a rogue, the way we do our rotation, simply put, we can have a look at our recharge speed, and that's at 7.5%. We get 2.5% from this offhand. Now if we switch to our new Mythic Weapons, we can see the recharge speed's gone down by 2.5% to just 5%. Now on a rogue, our cooldowns are usually pretty long. We'll switch out to the powers we might usually use, which would be this setup. We'd go in combat, we'd use our Path of Blades, our Wicked Reminder, our Assassinate, and we can see we've got 3 of those stacks, which means our recharge speed has gone up to 8%. So that's already higher than if we were using our Lionheart weapons with that extra modification. But then we've got to use those encounter powers quickly again, because those stacks only last a total of that 20 seconds. And we can see now we have 5 stacks because we didn't cast our next encounter power, which means our recharge speed is at only 7%, which is odd because we have 5 stacks, and this should give us a total of 5% recharge speed, where in fact we're only gaining a 1% buff now, and then they're all gone. So it's a little odd there with the stacks. We cast it, we cast another one and another one. We should have 3 stacks, which indeed we do. We can check that there again, 8%. Yes, that's correct. But it appears these stacks are actually dropping off, not visually, but separately. We cast our Path of Blades, we cast our Wicked Reminder, and then we have a look, and we are at 7%, but we're at 5 stacks, we should be at a total of 10%. So they seem to actually drop off individually and not actually refreshing like the tooltip shows. Now we have cast 6 encounter powers, so we're at Scalebreaker's Wrath, giving us the extra damage boost. So these weapons are not even as good as you'd think they are. However, we still are usually just going to cast 3 encounters, which gives you 3 of those stacks, which will give you 3% recharge speed. Temporarily, because as soon as you can see like they go off cooldown, the stacks drop off after 20 seconds. Even when you go and cast your more encounter powers to refresh all of those stacks, you can see that there we go, we have none of the stacks because we just refreshed Scalebreaker's Wrath. So you'll cast one set of encounter powers, gain 3% recharge speed. You'll cast your next set of encounter powers, all your recharge speed will be gone because you'll just have the damage boost. Now, if we have such long cooldowns, are we able to maintain that Scalebreaker's Wrath, giving us that 7.5% through the entire fight? That is the question, because if we're not, then that means we basically shouldn't be using these and we could use Lionheart instead. Right now we're only at 5 stacks, and that was with some odd bug where Path of Blades sometimes doesn't actually proc those. We cast it again here, and that did go and proc it. We have our Scalebreaker's Wrath, and that lasts us 30 seconds. Now we can gain more of those stacks again. We're gaining Scalebreaker's Ire, but we can see Scalebreaker's Wrath is on cooldown. So we have to make sure to cast 6 encounter powers within 30 seconds, which is doable, but only just. And there we have 5 stacks. We have our Scalebreaker's Wrath, which is now gone, and then we should be able to cast that power, and you can see there we have our Scalebreaker's Wrath again. If your cooldowns are 15 seconds, you can only just about get that damage boost refreshed again. Now if we go look at this trial scenario, you can see these weapons still could be pretty good, because most of the time you'll be casting your counter powers as soon as they're off cooldown. Even when the boss goes and flies off and then he pops back down, you can be right in his face and you keep damaging him. Now you want to watch out for lightnings here, and some people won't like you to be adjacent to the dragon because you can cause lightnings to be under the dragon, which can screw up people's push. Now you can also, in the first phase, generally you'll call artifacts after the first spread, and we can see that here, and then we come back and we call artifacts, and that's when we use our encounter powers again. Here I would have to make sure I cast all 3 encounter powers before using my daily, my mount power, to actually gain the 7.5% damage boost. In my opinion, it's better to just have Mirage or Lionheart, or of course just all Masterwork weapon set for this first phase at least. And then the later phases, sure, you could make use of the Mythic Weapons just because of the nature of, if you have Lionheart, you'll dodge a lot, you'll reduce your damage, and Mirage, the clones just die to all of those areas on the ground all the time. And as for celestial weapons, well, they're basically just a lesser version of these mythic ones. They pretty much have the same effect. So to conclude, should you be using these weapons or not? In my honest opinion, they are pretty good in the later stages of the new trial. Otherwise, if you're not dodging a lot in the content you're running, Lionheart can just be better for the continual uptime, along with the bonus damage on your main hand to your at-will, along with the bonus to your stat, and also, let's say, recharge speed or action points for the modifications on the offhand. The item level difference is too small to make up that difference between the Lionheart and the Mythic Weapons. As for those celestial weapons, well, in my opinion, there's little to no difference between these new mythic weapons and the celestial. Just the item level is all that sets them apart. So if you have the celestial weapons, which in fact I do, then these would be generally a better option. However, on a rogue, because our cooldowns are so long, I'm hesitant to use them because you might end up not casting an encounter power within the 15 seconds and losing those divine charge stacks. So on a rogue, at least, that's all I can really speak for in my experience. The Mirage weapons are still better in most content, and in other content where you need survivability or dodging all around the place and otherwise your clones would just die, then you're better off with a damage boost. And of course, in pretty much all content, if you can run the masterworks and you can have a full party with everybody using them, that's hats off the best you should be using, because that 10% outgoing damage and 10% reduced incoming damage is just massive, and it's great to farm a trial having that full set. And they also have full modifications to go with them. So with that said, hopefully this has been at least somewhat insightful to you guys. Again, these weapons are a little bit disappointing. Barely any uniqueness with regards to their set bonus. Sure, a little bit of your extra fluff there with regards to gaining recharge speed and action points on those stacks. But I'm assuming that's literally just to make up for, instead of having the artifact modifications on your other weapons, which I much prefer because they give me the reliable damage boost to my at-will along with reliable bonus, let's say my 2.5% recharge speed. So again, I'd like to give a massive thank you to all of my channel members for helping me keep my channel going. And if I presented this well, consider leaving the video a like. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. We'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.